And now we are going to take a virtual walk through the neighborhoods of our local schools. No matter what transportation mode is used, every student needs to arrive and depart school, and we want to make sure that they're doing so safely. Just like adults commute to work, students commute to school, and their day starts when they leave their home. Vivian will touch more on the arrival dismissal observations, but that evaluation tool primarily focuses on the school property. On the other hand, a walk audit focuses on the routes to and from school and within the school neighborhoods. A walk audit examines a school's outdoor surroundings, observes the safety and accessibility conditions firsthand, considers how all transportation modes interact, and lastly, it encourages an open dialogue between stakeholders to build consensus on recommendations. It's important to remember that no school is an island. All schools are located on public roads and municipal sidewalks, local traffic, parks, private homes, apartment buildings, and businesses large and small. This is what makes up a community, whether the community is rural, urban, or suburban. No matter what transportation mode is used, every child needs to commute safely. A walk audit identifies improvements, which makes it easier, safer, more convenient to walk, bike, and roll. This definitely has a positive impact on students, families, and staff. Lucy did touch on this during her presentation, but it is worth restating that safety improvements for pedestrians and bikers often result in more students choosing to walk, bike, and roll to school. We've said it before, and we'll say it again, more students using active transportation equates to less vehicular traffic and improved air quality. The resultant increase in student physical activity is linked to improved student concentration for better academic performance, less school absenteeism and tardiness, and addresses childhood obesity. Students also boost their independence and build community and social connections. Staff coming from a distance also feel safer walking to school when they need to park in the neighborhoods. They will also be more likely to volunteer to help with a park, walk, and roll location if they realized it would help them stay out of the arrival dismissal traffic around schools. We've seen staff members who are eager to volunteer for this duty because they can just scoot out rather quickly at the end of the day because they are outside the congestion zone. Overall, community safety and connectivity within neighborhoods are improved. Our goal is to create long-lasting, sustainable, community-run Safe Routes to School programs. However, we do understand that making any change stick is a challenge. Change is more equitable when it addresses all schools in a district, not just a few. These bullet points are taken directly from our Equity Strategies for Schools document that is available on our website under the Equity page. While the document discusses equity strategies for all the other E's based on level involvement in Safe Routes, the recommendations you see here are specifically related to the engineering E. The recommendations based on walk audit observations can be accepted as a procedural or policy change in order to manage ongoing community student concerns in a lasting fashion. Such actions address sustainable change. Examples include consistent and effective crosswalk striping, uniform school zone signage, use of more visible and regulatory signage, and since we are in New England, snow removal policies. Kudos to walking, biking, and rolling in the winter. Schools and school administration must work together with municipal government departments and committees, as well as local community organizations. The most successful Safe Routes programs are those where there is open communication between all the necessary stakeholders. What are some examples of these stakeholders? For the schools, that includes administration, such as superintendents and principals, PE teachers, nurses, parents, guardians, facilities, etc. For the municipality, that includes pedestrian and bike committees, planning and engineering departments, select board, DPW, police, fire, and so on. And then for the community, that includes the local Y, Boys and Girls Clubs, libraries, Mass in Motion, bike shops, and other or local statewide organizations. These are just a few examples, but we do know that every community is unique. Each walk audit participant brings their expertise and local neighborhood knowledge that complements the group's experience. We encourage creating a diverse group because it rounds out the needs of the schools and also the greater community. The more varied the participants, the better the results for the school. And yes, Safe Routes has been conducting in-person walk audits given current events. The outreach coordinators have not had an issue with social distancing with small groups of interested attendees. You may have noticed some COVID informational signage over the last year or so in your travels as well. So what exactly is the walk audit process? Your school neighborhood is not the outreach coordinator's backyard, so it does take a village for us to learn what you need and how best we can make recommendations for positive change. Anecdotally, while Safe Routes does not routinely provide for interpreters on walk audits, the cultural makeup of the student body and any cultural customs are considered when making our recommendations. First, we will learn about both the school's and community's successes and challenges through discussion and research. This is typically done on a different day ahead of the walk audit. Next, we would decide on a walk audit route. These tend to be agreed upon based on an already established and highly traveled route, student address data, or a potential park, walk, and roll location. The school or Safe Routes then invites all the relevant stakeholders to attend the walk audit. And then on the day of the walk audit, your Safe Routes to School outreach coordinator would facilitate discussions along the route, take notes, and capture walk audit observations through pictures. With all of this info, your OC would write a report which is reviewed with the school and other interested parties. But as a note, the local school system is the entity who requests our programming and owns any reports. Safe Routes may work directly with non-school personnel, but the school must be the one to give permission to share the report with non-school personnel. We try to conduct walk audits while keeping a student's perspective in mind. The average height of a second grader is roughly 3.5 feet, which is the height of the back window of an SUV. This also happens to be the vehicle's blind spot. So we like to think, what is it like for a student to cross the street? What is it like for a driver to be able to see the student cross a street? And now let's review some of the typical findings that we might see on a Safe Routes to School walk audit. Sidewalk conditions include, what's the quality of the sidewalk? Is there trash, tripping hazards, root damage, dangerous drop-offs, and other obstructions? Maybe trash cans or construction or down telephone wires. The first image you see shows a sidewalk that has not been maintained. It's crumbling and barely usable because of the encroaching vegetation and trash scattered on it. The second image shows the remnants of a signpost that is still embedded in the sidewalk. If a pedestrian wasn't paying attention, they could trip quite easily and potentially get hurt. The third image shows some loose wires attached to a telephone pole on the sidewalk. While likely that these wires were live, it could still be a hazard to students walking. The last photo shows a newly constructed sidewalk that is not yet usable due to construction. While there is nothing wrong with this per se, it is worth noting for potential future walking routes. It should be noted that Safe Routes does not make recommendations on sidewalk materials or curbing for a named site, only reports on their conditions. Each municipality also has specific code language that governs sidewalks, which can vary by communities. We also want to see where the sidewalks are located and where they lead. Do you have a sidewalk in your community that leads to nowhere? Does it just end abruptly like the first two images you see here? Students may not be aware that the sidewalk eventually ends on that side and would then have to cross the street randomly where there wasn't a crosswalk. Sometimes you see evidence of a well-traveled path where a sidewalk should be, like the last image. We like to call these goat paths. Can you think of any places like these in your communities? Crosswalk conditions are also important to observe. There are many different styles and types of crosswalks, and honestly, some are better than others. When looking at crosswalk conditions, we like to keep these questions in mind. Do the crosswalks connect to sidewalks? The first image shows a crosswalk that connects nothing to nothing. Is there pedestrian signage to accompany the crosswalk? This helps to increase crosswalk visibility so drivers are aware of an approaching crosswalk. How visible are those crosswalks? Are they faded? The middle image shows one that's so faded it's barely visible. What type of pavement pattern is used? Is it consistent across the community? The last image shows two crosswalks right next to each other, but each are painted in a different style. The pattern that is used in designing a crosswalk can add to its visibility. Two parallel lines are the least expensive to maintain, but aren't as visible. Zebra or ladder patterns do use more paint, but are more eye-catching to drivers. Solid patterns are sometimes used in downtown or historical areas. I mentioned crosswalk connectivity on the last slide, and I do want to explore that a bit more here. Some crosswalks aren't up to code. For example, all crosswalks should connect to a sidewalk and a landing pad, not to another crosswalk like you see in the first image here. Note, private driveways are not a public landing pad. Some crosswalks are also too long, which makes them less safe, especially when they are on the diagonal. The second image you see here is a long crosswalk that stretches over 2 intersections. That is a long time for students to be in the road. Line of sight around crosswalks and hills are also particularly important to take into account. On the left, vehicles stopped at the crosswalk obscure the line of sight for a pedestrian for the second lane of traffic. This is shown in the shadowed triangle. This is doubly true if there are vehicles encroaching in both directions. On the right, installing a stop line or enforcing a no parking here to crosswalk or corner sign allows pedestrians and bicyclists open space in which they can see the traffic and the traffic can see them. Appropriate regulatory signage can help enforce vehicles not to interfere with pedestrians' line of sight. While on your walk audit, you might come across a signalized intersection. A lot of signalized intersections have been created to move a high volume of cars through at a time, and in most cases, they are not that pedestrian or bike friendly. When approaching a signalized intersection, here are a couple things to keep in mind. When you push the walk button, how long does it take for the walk signal to appear? Do you have to wait through many light cycles? Is it an all walk? AKA, do all cars have a red light, or do some cars have a green light when the walk signal is on? Sometimes cars are allowed to turn left while the walk signal is activated, which can sometimes pose a problem for pedestrians. How many seconds do you have to walk through the intersection? Does the intersection give you a countdown? Students tend to walk slower than adults, especially if they're in a group. So would there be enough time for them to get through the intersection? Or would they get stuck in the middle of the crosswalk or an island halfway through? And lastly, do all the buttons actually work? One of the pictures you see here is actually Judy testing all the buttons at an intersection near a school. We realized that one side didn't work. Although this was an all walk intersection, the students would have been waiting there for quite a while if they didn't know that that specific button didn't work. We also look to see how inclusive the infrastructure is. Tactile pads, properly sloped ramps, and pedestrian activated countdown buttons are important safety features for physical, hearing, and sight impaired residents. These 3 images show the varying levels of ADA compliance. The image on the left shows a crosswalk with curb ramps and ADA tactile pads with pedestrian activated buttons. The middle image has curb ramps, but no ADA tactile pads and no pedestrian signage. The image on the right shows a brightly painted crosswalk, but unfortunately there are no curb ramps, no ADA tactile pads, and no pedestrian signage warning drivers of the approaching crosswalk. Does your community need modified pedestrian walk buttons for the hearing impaired? Should older walk stop pedestrian instructional screens in English be replaced with visual only images for a more multilingual world? If you are encouraging students to bike more to school, you do want to make sure that they have the proper bike accommodations so they can bike to school safely. Here are some things to consider. Does your community have enough bike racks, or do students have to improvise? The first image shows a bike attached to a pole instead of a bike rack. Are the bike racks functional? Sometimes bike racks may look great, but they are either placed too close to a wall or it's difficult for students to get their bikes in and out of them. Are the bike racks located in a convenient spot where students can access them easily? For example, can you spot the bike rack in the third image? This one was buried so deep in some brush by the athletic field at a school, and it was completely unusable. The school didn't even realize it was there. Also, if students are biking on the road, do they have a dedicated bike lane? Is there enough room for them on the road to bike safely? Is there signage or pavement markings reminding drivers to share the road? Speaking of sharing the road, this is a great time to give a shout out to our new bike-friendly driver document that is available on our website under the education section. It shares some great tips on how to better share the road with cyclists. It is available in 10 languages, and so it's perfect to share with families. Signage is another big factor to look out for. Are there poles that have too many signs on them where it's overwhelming to read, like the first image you see here? Your eyes don't know where to look first. Are the signs outdated, old, warped, or faded, like the stop sign in the second photo? Are the signs regulatory or informational? Regulatory signage includes anything from the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or MUTCD. Other signs that you can get online, like sandwich boards, are informational and cannot be enforced by the police. You also want to look at signage consistency throughout a neighborhood. An example of this is shown in the third and fourth images. The third image is the pedestrian signage that is located closer to the schools. You can see that it's quite basic and not very reflective, whereas the fourth photo shows pedestrian signage found deeper in the neighborhoods farther away from the school. These signs are both from the same community and the fourth photo has the bright reflective coloring and the yield to pedestrians notice on the bottom. We want to stress that crossings near the school should always be marked, as well as crossings further away that are used by school families. See the MUTCD for guidance on signage locations. While on our walks, we also look at how vegetation impacts sidewalk access and visibility. Many residents don't realize that they're responsible for the property between their homes and the street. Overgrown shrubbery, invasive vines, poison ivy, and weeds can grow from properties and tree wells to block sidewalk access. It can even block important signage. Can you see the flashing 20-mile-an-hour school zone sign in the second image? I bet the speeding cars couldn't at the time. The vegetation has since been trimmed back, and that sign is fully visible again. What could be more New England than autumn leaves scattered all over the ground? Well, leaves can be a slippery hazard when wet. The third image you see here shows a thick layer of leaves completely covering a brand new sidewalk and crosswalk. The last image shows a sidewalk that has been completely taken over by old leaves and dirt. When we started uncovering it, we realized it was actually almost twice as wide as we had originally thought. There was no need to install a wider sidewalk. It just needed a little TLC. A great way to solve these problems is to have a community cleanup day to organized by the PTA or PTO. It helps maintain good access and visibility, gets the community invested in the infrastructure, and then it also helps out the facilities team. I know no one wants to hear this, but winter is coming. And with that means it is dark at 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. And of course, those times directly overlap with school start and end times. It should be noted that students are still commuting to and from school in the winter months, so school and neighborhood lighting improvements should be considered. Another lighting issue that some folks forget about until it's literally blinding you is solar glare. It seems to be the worst this time of year too. While we cannot change solar glare, we can communicate about it using signage and thoughtful crosswalk placement. Speaking of winter, another element to consider is water. If there are drainage issues or clogged storm grates, there tends to be large puddles pooling right where students would be walking, like the first image you see here. In the winter months, this could then lead to icy conditions. Snow, on the other hand, obviously falls everywhere, so it's up to us to put it into an appropriate place. The second image shows remnant snowbanks that were on either side of the crosswalk in front of a school. What was left was all ice, and it was quite slippery to get over and across. The third image shows an already narrow sidewalk that is completely impassable due to a combination of the telephone pole in the way and the snowbank blocking the rest of it. The last photo shows a snowbank hiding important signage at a school near their arrival dismissal loop. I do want to note that a Safe Routes walk audit does not include an examination of local snow ordinances, but only observations of where we do see it. Safe Routes recommends local task forces or transportation managers meet periodically with the Department of Public Works so that information on larger bus stops and frequently used walking routes are shared. Snow placed on a crosswalk ramp is not optimal. With neighborhood conditions, the perception of what is safe is rooted in many variables. Besides vehicle speed, other conditions within a school neighborhood also contribute to how one feels about their environment. Examples include trash and household items, road conditions, as well as building and property conditions. So on our walk, do we see any beware of dog signs? Thinking about student allergies, are there any beehives close to the road? And please remember, wildlife is everywhere. We all want to minimize these eyesore elements, but we also want to avoid broken window policing, which can lead to racial bias and be problematic. To wrap up, some general observations to keep in mind include, are the sidewalks uneven in width due to light poles, utility poles, hydrants, like the first image you see here? Do vehicles park on the sidewalks and block access, like the second image? Similar to my earlier mention of worn-in goat paths, do you see students using cut-throughs or trails created across private properties? Are there popular routes connecting neighborhoods near the schools? The third image shows a location on a street where people naturally tend to cross, even though there is no crosswalk located there. The last image shows a heavily used path through a neighborhood that leads directly to a school campus. I know I just covered a lot of information. It sounds like it would be hard to remember, but we've made it easy with our new walk audit checklist. This checklist is a one-stop shop to help assess the walkability or bikeability around a neighborhood. And you can see the images here are screen grabs from the document. So the first page kind of gives you a great synopsis of what to do before, during, and after the walk audit. It gives you room for notes, like street crossing conditions, and it also provides a guide for ideal signage in an intersection. If you were to request a Safe Routes to School walk audit, I mentioned that you would receive a final report from us detailing our observations, supporting photos, and considerations for engineering improvements. Our reports are concise, easy to read, and also include resources to help you on your journey to improving the neighborhood. I do want to stress that a walk audit is only one component within our evaluation E. In order to foster growth and change, you need to consider the other E's. A walk audit alone cannot solve all of the problems, just like engineering alone cannot solve all of the problems. That holistic route will help you be much more successful in your Safe Routes efforts. Therefore, we include a section within the report that lists education, evaluation, encouragement, engagement, and equity suggestions to improve student safety. And in closing, it is important to remember that all we want is for our students to get to and from school safely and to make sure that they are healthy and happy. Thank you. And now we will open it up for any questions.